Imagine being stripped completely naked in front of strangers. Your genitals, your body, your teeth, examined like livestock. You don't speak their language, you don't know where you are. And the last thing you remember is walking through a forest near your village, and then men with pistols grabbed you. That was Tuesday. By Friday, you were chained to 400 other human beings in the belly of a ship. The floor was coated in blood and mucus. The person next to you just died of dysentery. You haven't eaten anything except a paste of rotting beans and herring in 3 days. And you have 2 more months on this ship. This wasn't a war crime committed by one evil man. This was a system, built by governments, funded by banks, insured by corporations, and operated for nearly 400 years. This is the story of the Transatlantic Slave Trade, and it is the most catastrophic forced migration in human history. Before the 1400s, slavery existed across the world, but it looked completely different. It wasn't permanent, it wasn't inherited, it wasn't racial. If you were captured in war or owed a debt, you might become enslaved, but your children were free. Then Europe discovered the Americas, and when they did, one thing became immediately clear. The land was full of gold, sugar, and tobacco. The problem? Who was going to harvest it all? Their first answer was the indigenous people already living there. But within 75 years, the indigenous population of Mexico alone collapsed by nearly 90%. Disease, warfare, brutal forced labor. They were dying too fast to be useful to the empire, so Europe turned to Africa. The Portuguese had already reached the Gold Coast in 1471. They had built trading forts, places like Elmina in modern-day Ghana. Originally built to trade for gold, Elmina was quickly converted into something far darker, a barracoon, a massive holding prison for kidnapped human beings, waiting to be shipped across the ocean. And the financial machinery that made this possible? Italian and German bankers provided the capital. Maritime insurance companies underwrote the voyages. This wasn't barbarians doing barbaric things. This was a corporate infrastructure built to traffic human beings at industrial scale. Let's talk about the actual numbers, because they're almost impossible to process. Between 1501 and 1867, 12.5 million African men, women, and children were loaded onto ships against their will. Of those, nearly 2 million died at sea, during a voyage called the Middle Passage. The ships were engineered to maximize cargo. Human beings were packed so tightly they couldn't sit up straight. In the summer heat of the Atlantic, the holds reached temperatures that would kill most people. 2/3 of those captured were prime-age men, because the plantations needed physical labor. But 26%, more than 1 in 4, were children. Where did they come from? 40% from Angola and West Central Africa, 30% from the Bight of Benin in West Africa. Where did they end up? Only 300,000 arrived in what is now the United States. The other 90% went to South America and the Caribbean, 4.5 million to the Sugar Islands of the Caribbean, 3.2 million to Brazil alone. Brazil was the last country in the Western Hemisphere to abolish slavery, in 1888. Let's go inside one of those ships. Because the history books make it abstract. It wasn't abstract. The voyage lasted 1 to 3 months. Captains fed enslaved people the cheapest food possible: cassava, yams, corn, horse beans stuffed with rotting herring. Preserved meats were so salty they caused severe dehydration, and water was strictly rationed. Grains were frequently infested with maggots and weevils. In these conditions, diseases spread like fire. Dysentery, called the flux, was the leading killer. It caused violent intestinal bleeding, gripping pain, and continuous vomiting. A ship surgeon named Alexander Falconbridge described holds during a dysentery outbreak as resembling a slaughterhouse, completely coated in blood and mucus. Scurvy, from total vitamin C deficiency, caused gums to rot, skin to erupt in colored scabs, and internal organs to hemorrhage. For enslaved men shackled at the ankles, the swelling from scurvy combined with iron chains turned every movement into agony. For enslaved women, scurvy's hemorrhaging was frequently misdiagnosed as a reproductive issue, leading to invasive, abusive medical examinations. Smallpox, yellow fever, measles, and then the sexual violence. European crews assaulting enslaved women throughout the voyage, spreading venereal diseases that caused fatal complications at sea. Slave traders had access to early smallpox vaccines. They vaccinated themselves and their crews. They rarely vaccinated the cargo. It cost too much. The psychological horror ran just as deep. Many captives believed death would return their spirits to Africa, so they jumped overboard, deliberately, by the hundreds. In 1781, the British crew of the Zong ship threw 130 living human beings into the ocean. Not because they were sick, because the ship was running low on water, and their insurance only paid for cargo lost at sea. Enslaved people were cargo. They filed an insurance claim. Here is what the mainstream history often skips. The enslaved did not wait for abolitionists to free them. They fought back strategically, brilliantly, and for centuries. In 1570s Mexico, a man named Gaspar Yanga escaped a silver mine near Veracruz and disappeared into the jungle. For 30 years, his forces raided Spanish supply lines, freed other enslaved people, and built a sovereign community. By 1618, the Spanish crown had no choice. They officially recognized his settlement as the first free black town in the Americas. In Jamaica, Queen Nanny led the Maroons in guerrilla warfare against British armies using the Blue Mountains as cover, camouflaging soldiers with plants, ambushing militias, and liberating hundreds. She's now Jamaica's only female national hero. In 1835 in Brazil, literate African Muslim men called the Malays coordinated an urban uprising using written Arabic, because their Portuguese captors couldn't read it. They timed the revolt to coincide with a Catholic holiday when authorities would be distracted. And then there was Haiti, the only successful slave revolution in human history. Enslaved people defeated local planters, the Spanish army, the British army, and then Napoleon's armies. In 1804, they founded the world's first black republic. They didn't ask for freedom, they took it. Abolition came slowly. Denmark first, in 1803, Britain in 1807, the US in 1808, Brazil in 1888. But here is the brutal irony of British emancipation. When Britain freed enslaved people in 1833, the government paid £20 million in compensation, not to the enslaved, to the enslavers, for their lost property. The enslaved received nothing. That debt was only fully paid off by British taxpayers in 2015. The African continent itself was permanently scarred. The slave trade deliberately targeted the most economically developed, most densely populated regions of Africa, not the poorest. Econometric research by scholar Nathan Nunn shows a direct causal link between how many people a region lost to the slave trade and how economically underdeveloped that region is today. And on March 25, 2026, the United Nations General Assembly finally passed a resolution declaring the transatlantic slave trade the gravest crime against humanity. 123 nations voted yes. The European Union abstained. The United States voted no. 12.5 million people stolen. 2 million dead in the water, centuries of wealth extracted from an entire continent, and the civilizations built on that extraction still stand today. This wasn't ancient history, this was a system. And the profits from that system built the banks, the ports, the universities, and the governments that shaped the modern world. Understanding this isn't about guilt, it's about accuracy. Because you cannot understand the world you live in today without understanding this.